we will be working to scale up pediatric vaccination. That said, it will take some time. And as I just noted, as we head into these winter months, we know we cannot be complacent. We also know that from previous data that schools that have had masks in place were 3.5 times less likely to have school outbreaks requiring school closure. So right now we are going to continue to recommend masks in all schools for all people in those schools, and we will look forward to scaling up pediatric vaccination during this period of time.
That's the CDC director, of course, and yeah, we don't have institutions we can trust anymore, and very few congressmen. Thankfully, we have one we can on the show right now. Big fan of Representative Thomas Massie from the great state of Kentucky. Congressman, America's institutions seem rotted beyond repair at this moment, and that sucks.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks for having me on, Jesse, by the way. The CDC is rotten. I caught them back in December lying to the public. I recorded my phone calls with them and then released those to Cheryl Atkinson, who's an investigative journalist. They were lying at the time about the efficacy of the vaccine for those who already had natural immunity. And you really can't, unfortunately, by the way, that was under Trump, and it's gotten worse under Joe Biden. You cannot trust the CDC. They're pushing these vaccines for children for ages 5 to 11. That's their latest push. Never should these vaccines be mandated for anybody, and they should especially not be mandated or coerced for children. And so I'm worried about where this is leading. You know, we have a lot of studies from the beginning of the pandemic when people were honestly trying to find the answers that showed that the flu was far more dangerous to adolescents and young children than COVID-19 itself.
Yeah, that's what kind of blows me away about this whole thing. From the very beginning, truth never seemed to matter at all. Facts never seemed to matter at all. Why are any kids in American schools wearing masks? Even quasi-socialist European countries don't have masks on their kids, and yet the supposed land of the free does. What's wrong with us now?
I'll tell you what, Jesse, I just came from an honor flight that landed in Washington, D.C. These are 90-year-old Korean War veterans, World War II war veterans, and it was delightful. None of them had masks on, and they all shook my hand. Nobody hesitated. None of them cared about a mask. They're from a generation where common sense prevailed, and we're living through a generation right now where common sense and science has gone out the window. For instance, let me tell you how far back we've gone in terms of medical knowledge. A lot of liberals like to point out that General George Washington required his soldiers to get a smallpox inoculation. What they failed to tell you is that General George Washington said not to inoculate those who already had been subjected to smallpox. He already understood 250 years ago that natural immunity from prior infection was a thing. Yet they don't even recognize that today in the military. And even George Washington himself did not receive a smallpox inoculation because he had already had it when he was a teenager. He had already had smallpox. By the way, that's why most of the British soldiers were subject to it. It was sort of endemic in Britain, and they had already had smallpox. So that's why it was such a threat to the American forces. But common sense has gone out the window. We've gone back 250 years in terms of our understanding of science, and it's really sad because people are suffering. Our soldiers are going to suffer because of this. That's why I've sponsored H.R. 3860. I authored this bill. We're up to about 40 co-sponsors. Just got another co-sponsor today. And I know it's almost too late, but I started this campaign in June before there was even a military vaccine mandate. And what H.R. 3860 does is it prevents the military from requiring or coercing members of the military to take the COVID-19 vaccine.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. I'm sure you've seen this, but I have a little video I want to play for the people here about our military members. And I'll tell you, it just enrages me to no end. Watch this.
Due to the new order of the COVID-19 vaccine, I will potentially face separation from the United States Army, and I'm currently pending a religious exemption
I have been assigned to be a lead junior sailor in our mentorship and training program, and I take great pride in doing so. I will potentially be discharged for denying the COVID-19 vaccine.
I have deployed to northern Syria and northern Iraq. In fulfilling my duties, I have been an FDC chief and an 81 section leader. I will potentially be discharged for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine.
Congressman, it floors me that we've gotten to the point now where we take these young, fit people in our military and we're just running them out. What's going to be left if we just continue to purge society of those dangerous unvaccinated?
Well, right, and I know you're using that dangerous unvaccinated facetiously, because the vaccinated, studies have shown, are spreading it to the vaccinated. And the unvaccinated, that's a choice that they make themselves. You know, the demographic most at risk for myocarditis is young males aged 19 to 24. Guess what? That is the majority of the enlisted members of our military who, in your videos, you saw they're facing discharge from the military. What they're not telling you is they may face a dishonorable discharge, and they may face a court-martial, which would put them in the same category as rapists and murderers and prevent them from owning a gun in their lives. Imagine that. You sign up to fight for for our country, for our Constitution, and then you get discharged because you don't take a vaccine that you don't need or that presents an unnecessary risk to you, and then you lose your rights that you signed up to fight for. This is despicable, and that's why I'm fighting for these folks. A lot of them have already been coerced into taking the vaccine, and I think it's borderline criminal to hold out this false hope of a religious or medical exemption, and then not to grant them to anybody. They are categorically denying them without giving them their due review, and I think that's a violation of what these folks signed up for when they signed up to the military.
I think I already know the answer to this question, but are there any Democrats signing on to your bill?
There are no Democrats signing on my bill. In fact, and so Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to bring this to the floor for a vote. That is because she knows that these obscene mandates are actually disproportionately affecting some of the demographics in their voting base. There are minorities who don't want to take the vaccine at a higher proportion than some of the other demographics. There are also women of who are working that are of childbearing age who have decided that because they want to have children or because they're carrying a child, they do not want to take this vaccine. You know, young females are typically voters that the Democrats count on. And so Nancy Pelosi is avoiding this at all costs. But we have been able to force this to a vote in two of my committees. On the Transportation Committee, I offered an amendment and forced a vote. Every Democrat voted against my amendment, which would have prohibited the vaccine mandates for travel, otherwise known as vaccine passports. So in essence, every Democrat who serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has already voted for vaccine passports. We did the same thing in the Judiciary Committee. We forced them to vote against vaccine mandates, but they all voted for it in the Judiciary Committee. That was Tom McClintock's amendment.
Congressman, keep doing what you're doing. Big fans on this show. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jesse. We'll follow you on Twitter, too. Follow me at Sassy with Massie.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.